It's absolutely disastrous that the United States has been in the hands of the Israel lobby or the Zionist lobby for decades. Israel is waging war all over the Middle East, destabilizing the entire region, and the United States is saying, okay, 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 okay. Even President Trump said, as Israel is now in war in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and I mean war. It's on the ground fighting in Yemen, in now Qatar. Donald Trump said yesterday, well, Prime Minister Netanyahu told me he's for peace. That's good. This is not good. This is not serious. This is extremely dangerous. And every time we've talked, Israel has just escalated its mass murder, its war on its own population that it has in occupation. And now it continues to expand the war, bombing Doha yesterday. And Trump saying he didn't know. I believe him. He didn't know. I'm sure the CIA knew. But they probably don't let Trump in on a lot of what's going on. This is all absolutely dangerous, reckless, and a very sad commentary on what passes for U.S. foreign policy. It's not U.S. foreign policy, it's Israeli foreign policy.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, he said it all there. I completely agree. The only kind of difference I'd have with him is even calling what's happening in Gaza a war. A war pertains to two sides vying, against each other. But actually what you have there is a genocide where one side is essentially defenseless with few people standing up for it. Hamas being wiped out mostly as a fighting force. They're not even hurling rockets into Israel anymore. And they haven't for months, since April, I believe. And I don't think they'll be able to wipe out Hamas through this, but Hamas is Israel's own creature. Netanyahu long supported Hamas because he thought its elevation and its ascension would destabilize the Palestinian Authority and prevent the enactment of a two-state solution. This is widely covered in the media, in the mainstream media, both in Israel and the United States, and he never has any good excuse for this. And Trump, tied to the hip of Israel, is always making excuses for Netanyahu and saying he didn't know about the strike. I don't believe that. I don't believe that the heads of Trump's deep state, the John Ratcliffes of the world, the Marco Rubios of the world, are keeping this kind of information from him anymore. You could have argued that in his first term, but now he has Trump's men, his own Zionist men around him. He would have known this. So I don't buy the lies anymore, and I hate the fact that the U.S. never uses any kind of financial leverage over Israel to get them to stop the slaughter. That's never done.
I want to play you the same clip I played Ian, which is Yalda Hakim from Sky News talking to Naftali Bennett, former Israeli Prime Minister. Let's take a look.
You've gone into sovereign territory, crossed the skies and launched this strike on a sovereign state.
When the U.S. went out and took out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, they didn't notify Pakistan in advance. That was also a sovereign country. You have to do this in order to eradicate terror.
So this has been the position of Israel from the start. We were attacked in an appalling terror attack, which is obviously true, on October the 7th. And we were then wedded as a policy to eliminate Hamas, and we will do that wherever Hamas is. Their argument is the Hamas leadership have been based a lot of the time in Qatar, in Doha. They got information clearly that they believed a number of the leaders were going to be in this particular building, and they attacked it. And what is the difference, they say, between that and what America did with Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad?
Well, I'll tell you some similarities. Indeed, the United States put Osama bin Laden on the CIA payroll in the 1980s. And similarly, Bibi Netanyahu put Hamas on the payroll. We all know that it was Netanyahu who went repeatedly to Qatar to tell Qatar, pay Hamas. They were funding Hamas.
Yeah, over $1.8 $1.8 billion of funding went from Israel to Hamas through Qatar. Qatar was the middleman because Israeli banks didn't even want to deal with this, with trying to fund this obvious terror group. And Netanyahu apparently had some pushback within his circles, but he boasts about this. If you see the Bibi files, you can see this, where he boasts about the fact that he controls the height of the flame. It's like the Godfather theory. He's saying this on video, saying that the quote from the Godfather, you keep your friends close but your enemies closer. That's how he justified this, and it's atrocious. Sachs is also right about CIA support for the Mujahideen fighters against the Soviet Union in the late 70s and early 80s. Arms flowed from the CIA to Pakistan's ISI, that's like their CIA, and then flowed into the hands of Afghan fighters that included militias with people like bin Laden fighting against the Soviets. And no, I'm sorry, Naftali Bennett is wrong. Israel doesn't maintain the right to kill Hamas everywhere. They maintain the right to kill Palestinians everywhere, because that's who's being offed in mass numbers. Even if you trust their data that was leaked a few weeks ago, Glenn Greenwald covered this story, 83% of the people they have killed in Israel, according to Israeli intelligence, have not been Islamic Jihad or Hamas. They've been innocents. So you can't tell me the women and children pulled up from the rubble are Hamas. I'm sorry.
So yes, there's a lot of the similar duplicity, but basically Israel is completely lawless. It is utterly a rogue nation. It is committing a genocide before our eyes. It is starving 2 million people. Children are dying of starvation every day. It is shooting people when they go to the food lines. Israel is just a murderous rogue nation. I have nothing else to say other than this is a country that is in brazen violation of every moral standard and every international law.
He's right, and the U.S. bankrolls it and supports Israel politically come hell or high water, no matter what, as a default. Never diverts from that. When's the last time the U.S. has seriously diverted from an Israeli foreign policy objective, sometimes shelving our own in the process, as in Iran, as in diplomacy with Iran? It's hard to name it. I guess the JCPOA to some extent in 2015. But even that, Obama agreed to up the funding for Israel as part of that because Netanyahu didn't like the JCPOA. That's really the only counterexample in the last decade I can think of
that we have right now. So when Naftali Bennett speaks, yes, he talks about Israel's impunity. And other Israeli leaders have said so in the last day. We will go anywhere. We will hunt anyone. Nothing is beyond our reach. Well, that is complete lawlessness. And they're speaking the truth of their point of view, which is that they have complete impunity to commit murder anywhere that they want in the world.
Yeah, it's like the Mossad original motto, through deception, thou must wage war. That's exactly what Israel does. It does it on the bankroll of the U.S. and with political cover from the U.S. Not just the Trump administration, the Biden administration was like this too. The deep state is like this too. And it's not beneficial to Americans by any stretch. Americans who actually care about their communities, don't want to be plunged into debt, endless wars, stupid entangling alliances, trade wars with India over these geopolitical conflicts. It's not in the U.S. interest whatsoever.
I don't agree with that.
What do you think happens as a consequence of the strike in Doha? It does seem a significant escalation. The reaction from countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia and others show how seriously they're taking this. Obviously, before October the 7th, there was a move to potentially bring the Saudis in to the Abraham Accords and so on. Now you've got UAE saying that actually the way things are going, they might come out of the Abraham Accords. There are going to be real-time consequences to this. And I was saying to Ian, I was at the state dinner thrown by the Emir of Qatar for Donald Trump a few months ago, and their relationship looked extremely warm, very respectful, and it came at in the middle of a Middle Eastern tour by Trump that had been focused on the extraordinary amount of business that was coming from these Middle Eastern countries in deals with America, totaling several $trillion potentially over a few years. Is all that up in smoke now? I mean, where does this leave us? If there is an attack by Israel into Doha in the way we saw that, and there's no consequence for it, where does that leave everything?
But basically, Israel is completely lawless. It is utterly a rogue nation. It is committing a genocide before our eyes. It is starving 2 million people. Children are dying of starvation every day. It is shooting people when they go to the food lines. Israel is just a murderous rogue nation. I have nothing else to say other than this is a country that is in brazen violation of every moral standard and every international law.
He's right, and the U.S. bankrolls it and supports Israel politically come hell or high water, no matter what, as a default. Never diverts from that. When's the last time the U.S. has seriously diverted from an Israeli foreign policy objective, sometimes shelving our own in the process, as in Iran, as in diplomacy with Iran? It's hard to name it. I guess the JCPOA to some extent in 2015. But even that, Obama agreed to up the funding for Israel as part of that because Netanyahu didn't like the JCPOA. That's really the only counterexample in the last decade I can think of
that we have right now. So when Naftali Bennett speaks, yes, he talks about Israel's impunity. And other Israeli leaders have said so in the last day. We will go anywhere. We will hunt anyone. Nothing is beyond our reach. Well, that is complete lawlessness. And they're speaking the truth of their point of view, which is that they have complete impunity to commit murder anywhere that they want in the world.
Yeah, it's like the Mossad original motto, through deception, thou must wage war. That's exactly what Israel does. It does it on the bankroll of the U.S. and with political cover from the U.S. Not just the Trump administration. The Biden administration was like this too. The deep state is like this too. And it's not beneficial to Americans by any stretch. Americans who actually care about their communities, don't want to be plunged into debt, endless wars, stupid entangling alliances, trade wars with India over these geopolitical conflicts. It's not in the U.S. interest whatsoever.
I don't agree with that.
What do you think happens as a consequence of the strike in Doha? It does seem a significant escalation. The reaction from countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia and others show how seriously they're taking this. Obviously, before October the 7th, there was a move to potentially bring the Saudis in to the Abraham Accords and so on. Now you've got UAE saying that actually the way things are going, they might come out of the Abraham Accords. There are going to be real-time consequences to this. And I was saying to Ian, I was at the state dinner thrown by the Emir of Qatar for Donald Trump a few months ago, and their relationship looked extremely warm, very respectful, and it came at in the middle of a Middle Eastern tour by Trump that had been focused on the extraordinary amount of business that was coming from these Middle Eastern countries in deals with America, totaling several $1 trillion potentially over a few years. Is all that up in smoke now? I mean, where does this leave us? If there is an attack by Israel into Doha in the way we saw that, and there's no consequence for it, where does that leave everything?
We should remember that the reason that the Hamas individuals were in Doha is that this was the group that was considering Donald Trump's negotiating position from yesterday. This was a negotiating group. Israel does not want negotiations. Israel, every time that there are negotiations, tries to kill the negotiators. I mean that literally, not figuratively. It doesn't try to kill the negotiations. It tries to kill the negotiators. When the United States and Iran were negotiating over the status of Iran's nuclear program, they were entering the 6th round. And if you looked at what the negotiators were saying on both sides they were making progress. That's precisely why Israel launched its so-called 12-day war on Iran, to stop the negotiations. This yesterday was an attack to kill the Hamas negotiators, who have said several times that they want the permanent ceasefire that the United States has been pushing. Israel wanted to kill them before they could say that. Why? Because Israel's vision of this particular government, though it has, unfortunately to say, wide backing in the Israeli public, is that Israel will control all of Palestine, and it will either kill the Palestinians or it will ethnically cleanse them, expel them, or they will live under complete Israeli domination. And
Yeah, he's exactly right. The hostages serve only as a propaganda tool for the Israelis. They could have gotten all the hostages back. Hamas actually was exchanging hostages throughout that first ceasefire organized by Donald Trump that Netanyahu violated and Trump apparently green-lighted the violation of. So they didn't even want all the hostages, because taking them off the table takes away the pretext that Netanyahu needs to justify the Greater Israel Project, to justify the total subjugation of Gaza, not just the quasi-subjugation. And they have been subjugated for a long time, even since 2005 and the so-called end of the occupation. Well, there's still a blockade, a diminishment of rights, a robbery of people's wealth, and just a complete two-tiered justice system, too. This is the case. This is the truth. Sachs is right. They murdered the negotiators, people that candidly tried to seek an end to this conflict, or at least, a remission of the conflict. And they're literally being murdered. Why? Because Israel doesn't want the ceasefire. They want subjugation. They want Greater Israel. They don't want normalizing relations. They want ethnic cleansing. They don't want peace.
Nothing is going to stop that. No negotiations, no two-state solution, no state of Palestine. This is obvious what they're doing. They are literally killing negotiations by killing the negotiators anywhere. And they're claiming the right of murder at any time, any place. Again, to my mind, this is a dangerous and rogue state. And what country in the Gulf can feel safe if the United States is giving a blank check, financing and arming and diplomatically supporting any attack, whether it's in Lebanon, whether it's in Syria, it was against Iraq, whether it's in Yemen, now it's in Doha, Qatar.
Absolutely. Israel's attacked 7 of its neighbors since October 7th now, and including dragging the U.S. into a war with Iran. Plus, it's the only nuclear power in the region. I'm sorry, folks, this isn't normal. Let this sink in. They're literally attacking virtually all of their neighbors. And they're expanding West Bank settlements into Syria and Lebanon, expecting U.S. support for that, getting it largely, destabilizing the Syrian regime in favor of al-Qaeda, elevating Jilani or al-Shara, who was the former al-Qaeda emir, the founder of al-Qaeda's actual affiliate, recognized by Ayman al-Zawahiri in Syria. It was called al-Nusra. He's the leader of the country now. We're just supposed to pretend there's nothing wrong with this relationship, which completely compounds our debt, expands inflation, creates enemies overseas to the extent that they don't already exist. We get more and more enemies every year. And Sachs is exactly right. This is the Israel first mentality and the fruits that it bears.
Of course, no one's safe. If Israel is the one that decides everything by military means, diplomacy counts for nothing, and the U.S. will always back us up. Why will the U.S. always back up Israel? It's one of the biggest mysteries imaginable. Is it Epstein files? Is it AIPAC money? Is it whatever misguided ideas? Nobody understands this.
I say all the above. If you ask me, Occam's razor, it's all of the above, for sure.
Honestly, because the last thing in the world is this is not in the U.S. interest. don't take it from me. Donald Trump said so yesterday. He said explicitly, this isn't in America's interest, and it isn't in America's interest.
Yeah, Sachs is right. I actually didn't see Trump's comment about that. It's surprising to some extent, but sometimes you see the truth slip out that none of this is in America's interest. And it's not just the slip up at Doha, which was a calculated murder.
Why did you feel compelled to write that?
Well, first of all, what the state of Israel is doing is criminal, obnoxious, genocidal, in my view. And it needs to be stopped. So this is the starting point. The foreign minister gave a talk at the UN where I was sitting right behind him in the UN Security Council. I found it completely obnoxious, aside from everything else. So I wrote the letter because I disagree wholeheartedly with the policies of the government of Israel. But I resent the fact that Israel claims to be speaking in the name of world Jewry, that is, of the worldwide community of people who call themselves Jews, which involves many different groups, different views, and so forth. But Israel does not speak for me. I'm an American-born Jew, and Israel is not my country. It's not my state. And I happen to find what Israel's doing completely unacceptable, aside from everything else. In the current context, there's another issue here. Not only is the government of Israel and the state of Israel presuming to rope me in to their war crimes because they say that Israel is the state of the Jewish people. It doesn't say it's a Jewish state, which would mean something different. It says it's the state of the Jewish people. But also in the United States right now, and in Britain, and in Europe more generally, if you speak out against Israel, you're very often attacked by our governments as being anti-Semitic, which in common parlance means anti-Jewish. And this is not at all the fact. One can speak out against Israel because Israel's committing crimes. That's a good reason to speak out. In fact, I think it behooves us to speak out against Israel. That, to my mind, has nothing to do with speaking against Jews. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think what Israel's doing is antithetical to the Jewish values that I understand as being core to Jewish culture and Jewish thought. But I also don't want this accusation that being against Israel and what the Israeli government is doing, let me put it more explicitly, is somehow anti-Semitic. I think that's completely obnoxious, false, and I think not just false, but motivated false. These are governments, whether in the UK or the US, want to clamp down on protests against Israel. Mm-hmm. They don't have a valid reason for doing that. They call it anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism is not a proper attitude. They call it that, but it isn't that. It's about war crimes. It's about genocide. It's about mass murder. It's about mass starvation. It's not about being anti-Jewish.
Well, let me ask you this, if I can get a little bit personal with this question, Professor. Yep. I mean, how have you been seeing this discourse kind of become entrenched in American public opinion or American debate, especially with the circles that surround you growing up and other times as well, currently in light of the genocide in Gaza, this whole idea of the conflation between nationality and religion, and this idea that only if Jews in America can only be safe if Israel is in turn safe. What do you make this narrative in public discourse?
The narrative at some level has been there for a while because after World War II, most of us in America, American Jews, lost family members in the Nazi Holocaust. I have family members in Israel, cousins, second cousins, and so forth. So the idea, as I was growing up, that Israel is a safe refuge for some Jews or Jews that are choosing to live there was a kind of norm, but not, I would say, a deeply examined one, at least in the communities that where I grew up. And it wasn't really such a controversial one for me as a young child in any way until the developments of politics in the after 1967, I would say, when Israel conquered the remaining parts of Palestine, occupied Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. I went to Israel the first time in 1972, so already 53 years ago, and I was told already at the time, it was explained to me that Israel was starting to make settlements in the occupied territories to make, and I heard the expression first there, facts on the ground. This was already put to me a half century ago. So I continued to travel to Israel. I was very supportive of something called Peace Now, or Shalom Achav in Hebrew, which was the idea that there should be peace and a two-state solution for creating a state of Palestine alongside a state of Israel. Well, I would say from the 1990s onwards, certainly, and one could argue that it predates that, so detailed question, Israel went more and more to the right, to militarism, to extremism, to a radicalization of society in many ways, to a brutality of society. So I watched that happen over the last 35, 40 years myself. I haven't been to Israel in many years. I have no plan or intention to go back, perhaps ever. What's happened has been really, in a way, shocking. How violent and vulgar and murderous the government of Israel has become, but according to the opinion surveys, broad-based views in Israeli society as well. Many, many things happened, but basically the continued occupation of Palestine and the rise to power of the Israeli right wing and the emergence of an extremist religious right wing, all shaped by similar historic problems. I went to Israel the first time in 1972, so already 53 years ago, and I was told already at the time, it was explained to me that Israel was starting to make settlements in the occupied territories to make, and I heard the expression first there, facts on the ground. This was already put to me a half century ago. So I continued to travel to Israel. I was very supportive of something called Peace Now, or Shalom Achav in Hebrew, which was the idea that there should be peace and a two-state solution for creating a state of Palestine alongside a state of Israel. Well, I would say from the 1990s onwards, certainly, and one could argue that it predates that, so detailed question, Israel went more and more to the right, to militarism, to extremism, to a radicalization of society in many ways, to a brutality of society. So I watched that happen over the last 35, 40 years myself. I haven't been to Israel in many years. I have no plan or intention to go back, perhaps ever. What's happened has been really, in a way, shocking. how violent and vulgar and murderous the government of Israel has become, but according to the opinion surveys, broad-based views in Israeli society as well. Many, many things happened, but basically the continued occupation of Palestine and the rise to power of the Israeli right wing and the emergence of an extremist religious right wing, all shaped by similar historic processes, drove Israeli society to a place that is unrecognizable for me from my youth. Israel is out and out genocidal in its intentions right now, in its statements, in its actions. How can any government in the world be starving to death up to 2 million people right now before our eyes in the TikTok age?
Sure.
So this is something, to my mind, that is not only profoundly illegal, profoundly disheartening, but in a way profoundly shocking. Now, if you go back, you can find ideological roots of this. You can explain some of this.
But can I interject here, Professor? Because listening to you give that answer, especially how you've been going to Israel when you were younger, and listening to how you've described what you just said, if I didn't have any context, I would be like, well, a two-state solution is effectively impossible based on the answer you just gave. But knowing where you stand and knowing that you actually still see, despite everything that's going on right now, you still see a two-state solution as the way forward. It's very hard to see what you're seeing, and I'm basing this just on the history that you just outlined. And if I were to even bring in the United States, as I know that you know, probably since Jimmy Carter, we've had successive American presidents wanting to have a two-state solution. But because of the fact that you have Israeli governments not wanting to give that solution, or actually wanting to give Palestinians a state, and adding to that the presence of the pro-Israel lobby in the United States, putting pressure anytime an American president or an American government wanted to find a solution, it is really hard seeing that outcome through, especially in light of Israel's actions the past 22, 23 months. Not to mention the fact, that Smotrich and others in the Israeli governments have explicitly said that it is their desire to bury a Palestinian state. So how do you see a path forward with a two-state solution?
First, I agree with you completely, every word you just said. I'm not saying this is a high probability. I'm trying to find a path to survival of the Palestinian people, first of all, before they are slaughtered, starved, expelled, crushed, or faced with the prospect of brutal apartheid rule for years and years to come. So that's the first point. I'm, in my day job, I'm an economist and a policy expert, and have been involved in policy and diplomacy, and have worked with more than 100 governments around the world for more than 45 years. So I'm looking for solutions, what to do. It should be understood in that. I often propound solutions that don't come about, by the way. So I'm not saying this is high probability. I'm trying to find a way forward. People say to me, by the way, why aren't you in favor of a one-state solution? I'd say, fine. I have no objection to that either. A binational solution. I just think it's far less likely than even the unlikely solution that I'm actually proposing. So I'm not talking in theoretical terms. I'm talking in practical terms. Now, in practical terms, I see the following. I work at the UN every day. I speak with dozens of ambassadors probably every month, at least to say hello, to chat. I would say 180 of the 193 UN member states support a two-state solution. This is very good because it's part of international law. It's part of the International Court of Justice ruling last year. It was just declared the policy of the UN General Assembly on July 29th, a month ago, in a high-level session on implementing the two-state solution. There is almost unanimous backing in the world for the two-state solution. I would estimate that 95% of the world's population live in countries where their governments support the two-state solution, and 5%. The
Right.
U.S. So the U.S. is 4.1% of the world population. Then there is Israel, which is a tiny sliver, and then there's, by the way, Micronesia, Vanuatu, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, and the only two countries that aren't microscopic left are Paraguay and Argentina under Milei. Okay, this is tiny. The overwhelming will of the world is for a state of Palestine now. My argument is that Israel's government is completely delusional and genocidal, by the way. That's part of the delusions. And Israel, of course, will never agree to this. So I'm not talking about an Oslo process or the final stage of negotiations or something negotiated. I want it to be imposed on Israel, pure and simple. Now, under the UN Charter, it can be imposed on Israel by the UN Security Council. Just one fly in the ointment, which is the United States government, which vetoes this. Mm-hmm. The rest of the world favors it. So, yes, in practical terms, I'm trying to change the U.S. government position. And I have three things on my side. One, it's the right thing to do. What's happening now is not in the U.S. interest at all. Phony. Yes, it's in the interest maybe of the Zionist lobby, but it is not in the interest of the American people. It doesn't benefit us in security terms, in moral terms, in economic terms, nothing. Mm-hmm. So it's totally antithetical to U.S. interests to be complicit in Israel's genocide. That's number one. Second, the entire world, as I've said, other than that handful of tiny places and a couple not quite microscopic places and the U.S. are against Israel's position and are in favor of the two-state solution. So that is a second very practical point that the U.S. can be really helped to understand that we're completely isolated. If the U.S. thinks that its future lies with Israel and Vanuatu and Nauru against the rest of the world, well, I don't think that makes much sense. Then the third point, very important, is the American people, who aren't asked very much about this, are sick of this. And the opinion polls show that they are overwhelmingly in favor of a state of Palestine, the two-state solution, and overwhelmingly against what Israel is doing. So this is not the case that the crazy American people, there are some crazy American people, but this is not the case that this is somehow emanating from below. So whether it's emanating from the Epstein files or emanating from AIPAC or emanating from bad habits or emanating from ignorance, there are all sorts of theories, but this is not emanating from the view of the American public opinion. And though our country is hardly democratic in spirit, and foreign policy is not driven by public opinion in the United States, and we have a military-industrial complex that runs the United States, I understand all of that. It's still true that when the gap is so wide between the politicians, who are pretty pathetic, let's be clear, and the American public, there's at least a tension because we have a semblance of democracy in the United States. Now, one of the ways that they want to narrow the gap is by this crackdown on the kinds of things I'm saying right now. This is clear. But the fact of the matter is, in a world of social media, where the social media every day on its feed is demonstrating Israel's genocide of the Palestinian people, crackdowns don't work very well.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this in practical terms as well, since you mentioned the UN, and you've been a strong advocate for the UN for years, and you've written about it in your book, A New Foreign Policy Beyond American Exceptionalism, about living by the UN Charter. But let me give you this example. I think a lot of people have been questioning the role of the UN the past 23 months in terms of its relevance and its ability to put an end to something like what's happening right now in Gaza. But let me give you an even more direct example. At the time of us recording this yesterday, as I'm sure you have seen, Professor, Israel did a double tap strike against on the Nasser hospital in Gaza, where it killed rescue workers and journalists. Now, what the UN has said in light of that attack is that it basically called for an impartial investigation. Now, we've seen that happen dozens of times with respect to Israel and its actions. And we know that an impartial investigation simply will not happen because of the fact that Israel just will not allow it to happen. And so my question here is, how do we get to a place where the UN can do something different moving forward and actually meaningful on the ground?
Well, let me just say one very specific thing, which is that the difference of where we are today and a state of Palestine that is the 194th UN member state and recognized by essentially all the world except Israel is one vote in the UN Security Council. So just from a completely tactical, very narrow point of view, if the United States changes its vote to stop its veto on the state of Palestine membership in the UN, Palestine becomes a member state. So this is something that could happen in an hour from now. This is not a heavy lift. Then you might say, yeah, but what does that change? Israel will continue to do what it does. It will still have 600,000 settlers in the West Bank. It will, yes, of course, that is true. But what I wanted to do first is to put an end to the delusion, the murderous delusion of Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu, and a lot of the Israeli people that they're going to hold on to this territory forever, because they ain't. And that needs to be said at the outset, not at the end. It needs to be said irrevocably at the outset. Your borders are the 4th of June, 1967, period, according to international law, as determined once again by the International Court of Justice in 2024. Now, following that, if the U.S. changed its position, there could be the interposition of security forces under the UN Security Council. There could be sanctions against Israel. There could be a suspension of Israel in the UN itself. There could be a military suspension of any military equipment. Many things could be done to bring this to fruition. I admit, I understand fully. It depends on the United States. But my point is, it doesn't depend on changing dozens of governments. It depends on ending the complicity in genocide of the U.S. government. And the American people get it. They get it as much as they can in our propaganda-filled world. They're 70% on board on this. So we're talking about, from my point of view, as of this morning, one vote which puts a completely different dynamic into play. If you say, A, what's the chance? B, will it really work? C, what happens then with the settlers? This, that. Yes, I will throw up my hands like everyone else and say, this ain't easy. I'm trying to find a practical way. There are 8 million Palestinian Arabs and there are 8 million Jews in Israel, and I don't want the Jews to kill all the Palestinians. That's the way it's going right now, or to expel them. And I think the best thing is security on both sides, even if it's a wall.